Hi, I'm Krista Redpath, and you are listening to Where Are They Now, a summer podcast series brought to you by Krista Redpath Media, where we break down the game, elevate the story, and champion the female voice.
Scotta Morton, who's a Montana State alum, former Bobcat basketball player, as well as a Bozeman High product. She also is a mental health coach and is so dived into just all sorts of different realms of what makes athletes tick, but also what makes humans tick. I can't believe how much I enjoyed this conversation, and that's what we lead with here today. I'm really excited to share this with you because I really think that you and I were talking to Scotta earlier this week, and I thought the best point she made among like 100 best points, but the best point she made was twofold. One, so many of the things that she does in the world of mental health and sort of accelerating athletes are to quote unquote find an edge. And what she always tells people is it's not about finding an edge, it's about finding yourself. Winning is not as important as having peace and love. And I love that she gravitated towards that. This is an exponentially fascinating conversation. And so great job setting this up. I was just so impressed with her. I left being like, I want to call this gal. She's such a great gal.
Well, and she's someone that I've wanted to know for a long time.
For sure.
And I reached out to Coach Binford, who made the introduction to me, but I've been following her on her social media platforms, and I feel as if she's just grown so much, and I can't wait to listen and to have our viewers and listeners have a chance to get to know Dr. Morton, because the mindset and motivation approach is really I think critical to the athlete's success, but also in life, Coulter.
No doubt. And that's one thing we talk about is, again, finding the edge, important, but also finding all of the other things, how to be okay with if you don't win, how to know that you've done your best, even if it wasn't because of some sort of success. Failure is a huge part of sport. We talk about that all the time here. Scotta Morton, she is again, former Montana State basketball player. She's technically from Bozeman, but she's actually from Gallatin Gateway. Anybody that knows that southwestern Montana, it's a distinctly different thing, right? And anybody that spent time in that neck of the woods, the more south or the more, west you get of Bozeman, the more rural it becomes. Bozeman's become just this hotbed, and it's growing so much, and that's an awesome thing. Montana State University has been thriving, the engineering and the computer sciences and all these different things. But at the end of the day, the beginning of the day, Bozeman is an agricultural town. It's a cowboy town. That's what it always was, and I hope that's what at least somewhat always remains. But that's sort of the background that Scotta Morton grew up with, and that's what we're trying to convey today. But great job, again, setting this up. She's a very, very fascinating person. But just tell us about sort of your entry point to her, not only as a basketball player, but also in what she does now.
Well, I guess I was so drawn to her because she played when I was just having my first baby, Evan. And
right.
So I was in a different era than her.
Totally.
But she played for 3 different coaching staffs
And
at Montana
for those
State.
that don't know, because Trisha Binford's been the coach at Montana State for forever and a day, basically 2 decades now, it was not, there was no stability. It was like big time turmoil at Montana State, late 90s, early 2000s.
And I think she was so humble in her ability to connect with us, Coulter, and to just be honest with us about those struggles and what she went through, making that transition from being a leading scorer for Montana State to having a new coaching staff coming in and her not playing a lot under Coach Binford. And so I loved hearing that. I also I thought she just spoke so true about her family relationships and the closeness with her brothers and her parents and that whole area of Montana that it just connects us all. And we found, Coulter, with our show and who we've interviewed, these ranch families and these players that have come from rural Montana, there's something that connects them with their work ethic.
No doubt.
And so you look at a Scotta Morton and then going to Mizzou and pursuing her PhD and then also being on staff there for almost 11 years and then deciding to go out on her own for Go For It coaching. I just think her journey is really fascinating.
There's no doubt. I love that part about it. I think it's something that bonds all of us Montanans together. And it's a common theme that has been a binding theme throughout all these Where Are They Now interviews, a lot of my Montana Football Hall of Fame interviews. It's pretty crazy how there is this common factor of, it doesn't matter if you grew up on a ranch or a farm, but having to go to work as a young person, it sets you up for success. So remember that if you're a young parent out there. Our Where Are They Now series, presented by Ryan and Miller Law. Ryan and Miller is a law firm specializing in personal injury and criminal defense. They handle cases across the state of Montana, and they focus in specific areas of law to ensure they provide their clients with the best representations, whether it's an automobile accident, medical malpractice, wrongful death, or DUI, even criminal charges. Ryan and Miller Law can help you. They have a free consultation service, a free phone line, anytime, 24/7. You can also visit ryanmillerlaw.com. Scotta Morton, a Bozeman High product, as well as a Montana State women's basketball alum, our guest on our Where Are They Now. Here's the first excerpt of our conversation with Scotta. Well, let's start the here and now, Scotta. Just tell people what you're up to, where you're at in the world, and everything that's been going on with you lately.
Yeah, so I live in Columbia, Missouri, which is probably the middle of the state between Kansas City and St. Louis. And I now run my own business called Go For It Coaching. And I'm a mental performance coach. So this is quite recent. So I've been doing this for 2 years after I resigned from my position in the University of Missouri Athletic Department. I always thought I was going to come back to Montana when I pursued grad school. That was the idea. But I got some great opportunities that were really hard to say no. And Columbia community has been good. I really do miss the mountains. I think you do have to leave Montana, to realize how much you appreciate it. But we've got some great trail systems out here in Columbia, so I do like to bike now.
Scotta, growing up in the Gallatin Gateway area, can you talk just a little bit about what it was like to go to school at Gallatin Gateway? And I know you're third generation Gallatin Valley.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really impressive. Can you talk about growing up?
Gallatin Gateway is such a special community. In fact, my best friend, we went to kindergarten through 8th grade. We came in with matching perms and matching outfits, and it was all over from there. Yeah, Sari. But one of the things that was unique, we went through 8 different grade levels with the same 16 kids. And then I did have my mother for my homeroom teacher a couple of years. She even made me call her Mrs. Morton. There wasn't much getting past Mrs. Morton, right? I'd forget and actually be raising my hand at the dinner table asking for more potatoes or forgetting where I was. But what's cool about that is that, my mom would go early to do lesson plans and stay late. And that's where I get a lot of shots up. So I started off as the manager for the 5th grade boys basketball team. Dwayne Walker at the time would let me come in and play. And that's where I really fell in love with the game. And middle school basketball was so fun. I mean, the big deal was when we go up the canyon to Big Sky and pay the O for Gophers. And we get to stop at the gas station and get tons of junk food, right? That was part of the fun. And have theme parties to Backstreet Boys on the bus. I mean, those were the times to be alive, right? Basketball at its best.
That's great. You sound like you have a very close-knit family with your parents. You have 2 brothers. Can you talk about some of the lessons learned from your close-knit family that guided you professionally?
Yeah, so my parents are still there in Gateway. I have one brother that lives right next to him. And then I had an aunt and uncle as well. Well, other brothers in San Diego, he's trying to make his way back to Montana. I was a big time oops baby. Thank goodness I was a girl. They're 8, 12 years older. And they would say that I got all my mental toughness from them. They were wrestlers. If I could have, I probably would have wrestled, even though it's kind of a big deal now, but I couldn't wrestle obviously back then. But yeah, my mom, as a teacher, just amazing servant heart, just cares for everybody. Dad worked in law enforcement, so pretty strong-willed man, had a great sense of humor too. He got that from his side of his family. So yeah, I think we're all pretty close-knit, Krista, but I would say everybody in my family is also very independent, and I think that comes from, the Montana generations of just being really connected with the land, right?
So Scotta, I have to ask, growing up where you did, was it always Montana State that you thought about for college? Were you always wanting to be a Bobcat, or can you elaborate on how you committed to Montana State?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I started going to camps. I would even backstep, but was it 5th? It was probably in 2nd, 3rd grade when you can go. And those were the best, right? Those day camps. I think Tracy Sheehan and Frank McCarthy. In those years, I still remember all the players, right? And I probably still have their evaluations that they gave me at the end of every camp. One was from Blythe Thomas, and I thought she was amazing. And her sister ended up coaching me in high school, sophomore year. So yeah, growing up in Montana, there wasn't many club teams, right? So the world of basketball outside of Montana for me didn't really exist. You were either going to go be a Bobcat, or you were going to go be a Grizz, or even, go to those great NAIA programs that we have too. So I was born to be a Bobcat. I think there was a news article about that too, somewhere out there, that I was born to be a Bobcat.
You mentioned
all of my both parents and siblings went to Montana State too.
You mentioned just the living off the land and having such an appreciation for the land in that part of the world. And I think that new people don't understand how much Bozeman was an ag community, right? I mean, it's Gallatin Gateway, the closer you get out that way, Churchill, Amsterdam, all the potato farms and stuff like that. So it's still a huge part of the valley. I just think people don't think about it as much. What do you think of the way that Bozeman has kind of evolved over these last 25 years?
Well, they're probably thinking about that more now, Coulter, with the Yellowstone TV show, right? So every time I bring up something with Montana now, they're like, oh, Yellowstone, Kevin Costner, right? So everybody thinks that's the way we do things out there. But yeah, I mean, growing up, my mom's side, they still own a ranch, Timberline Angus Ranch, cattle ranch, south of Belgrade. And then my dad's family actually used to own the Rainbow Ranch Lodge at Big Sky. So yeah, that was very part of much of, growing up, or visits out to the ranch every weekend to visit grandparents. I can't say I wasn't much help. My dad actually used to have a little ropings every Friday night at our house. And I was never much into the horses or that whole scene, but that's where all the kids got to, come play and get together. So yeah, being outside, right? Fishing, tried a little bit. Dad was a hunting. I wasn't up for that. I broke my dad's heart at 16 when I told him I wasn't going to do that anymore. But yeah, very close to the land. And, every time I go back, that's some breathtaking sights to see.
I broke my dad's heart at 16 when I told him I wasn't fishing anymore either. I loved hunting, fishing. I was like, Dad, I'm down for floating, swimming, rowing, no fishing. I don't know. Call me an un-Montanan. I'm not a fishing guy, but if you give me the rows to the boat, I will get you some fish, I promise. So there's my promise. If you want to fly fish, I can row the boat. There's no question about it. Do I want to cast the line? Not at all. It's because I'm blind. I don't know where to throw it.
Just give me a basketball hoop and a ball.
Basketball hoop, even a net, anything like that. I do like the concept of fishing. It's in jest. Truly, I'll row the boat all day long. I'll get you into the eddies, the rapids. I get you the good places fishing. I just, the pole, it's because I snagged my leg one time. I got the hook in my leg. It just didn't work for me. Scotta Morton, our guest on our Where Are They Now here. Krista Redpath in studio with me, Coulter Nuanez. After an accident, you want an attorney that you can count on and trust. Someone who will fight for you and make sure you get the compensation you deserve while focusing on your healing and getting back to normal life. When you hire Ryan and Miller Law, that's exactly what you're going to get. If you've been injured in an accident, call Ryan and Miller anytime, any day, and get the help you need from their experienced legal team. Contact them at 406-542-2233. That's 542-2233, and visit RyanMillerLaw.com. More with Scotta Morton here in just a minute. That was fun hearing a little bit about her background. We're going to talk a little bit about her time at Montana State. Scotta Morton, a Bozeman High School product, a Montana State alum, and our guest on our Where Are They Now series this week, Krista Redpath in studio with me, Coulter Nuanez, presented proudly by Ryan and Miller Law, your Montana attorneys. We transition the conversation into Scotta Morton about her time at Montana State. There was a lot of tumult at this time. They had a coach fired. Then they brought in Trisha Binford. Binford is a veteran of the Big Sky now. She's entering season 20. But back then, she was a early 30s coach that had no head coaching experience. So here is Scotta Morton on her time early on in her career with Montana State.
Scotta, during the years that you played for Montana State, you went through 3 different coaching staffs. It was a time of change, and you ended up playing for Coach Binford. Can you talk about your years being a Bobcat and what it was like to go through that much change?
Yeah, lots of transition for sure. Lots of turnover, which was challenging. And at the same sake, formed some great bonds and relationship with teammates going through that together. I would say, that crucial junior to senior year was really where my calling came from. And Coach Binford and I have a great relationship now. She was hitting me as this, my junior year where I was probably defensive and had some pretty thick armor up, maybe rightfully so. And she was coming in as a first year, very young head coach. And so during those last couple of years, I was our leading scorer junior year, which wasn't saying much. We had a 3-23 team, only 2 other juniors. And then I went to my senior year not playing very much, in my hometown. And that hit my ego pretty hard. And so out of that, I had a lot of questions that I needed answer. And that's where sports psychology came this avenue, about 1, how do we set up a flourishing environment for athletes to thrive? And then 2, how do we better our relationship with ourselves so that competition doesn't feel like a threat and more like an opportunity? So that's really where my calling came from. And I'm really actually grateful for that adversity looking back, although the 21, 22-year-old Scotta was really having a tough time then.
Speaking to adversity, I was also someone who went through knee injuries where it was a different experience from junior to senior year, and just expectations and all of those pieces that are overlaid that you put on yourself and the communities put on the athletes. Why did you choose the University of Missouri to continue to pursue your education? And was there a draw there with the sports psychology program or avenue?
Yeah, it said, a repetitive theme here will be how naive I was. And I was very naive. And I thought, the sports psychology route was going to be, great. I knew sport, psychology, kind of my major. Let's combine this two and let's go for it. But anyway, my AD at the time, his name is Peter Fields, actually played with his daughter. She was also on our team. He used to work at the University of Missouri previously with, which would have became my mentor, Rick McGuire. And something that was cool about Rick McGuire is that he was a sports psychologist or mental performance coach, but he was also the head coach of the track and field team here at University of Missouri. So I got a really unique lens of what it looks like, sports psychology looks like going to and through the coach. And I laugh because, part of my experiences going in was this idea that I was going to save the world, from all these mean coaches, all these athletes, got to go out and protect them. And then, from the coach's point of view, getting in the trenches with them, seeing actually how lonely they can be on their island. They've got their own stressors. Ended up turning into more saving them from the athletes. So I laugh at my evolution through my career in these 11 years, but really seeing it as a bridge builder between the two.
Bozeman's been a one high school town until the last couple of years. And so, and even like I worked at the Bozeman Chronicle for several years.
Sure.
It's all about the Bobcats and the Hawks, right? Mm-hmm. So being a Hawk earned Bobcat, and I know Katie Burrows did the exact same thing too. I mean, but then also having so much tumult during the Montana State times. I mean, what was it like just being a hometown girl just on Montana State during your career?
So that was what's so special. I mean, I was lucky to have both grandparents on each side, so that was a family affair. I always had a huge family section there, which is awesome. I think my grandparents would get there an hour and a half early and would meet Mark Kellogg, who's now at West Virginia, head coach there, in the elevator on the way down, and they would talk about the game and stuff. So, everybody was really invested. And of course, their friends came too, and just that community, it was really hard to beat. Katie Burrows and my grandpa were actually good friends growing up too, Frosty. And we actually nicknamed a camp that we brought up together called Sid and Frosty's Camp after we were done, which was also really cool as our way of giving back to the community. So that friendship goes deep.
Scotta, just pointing to that, the teammate bond that you have, and I compare it to going to war with your friends. You have moments that you experience with your teammates that are hard to really put into context, and the friendships run deep. Can you talk about those friendships and if you stay in touch with any of your Bobcat teammates now? Yeah, I mean, you really grow up together, right? From that age group, from the 18 to 22, coming in as freshmen through that senior year. And we had some turnover in those first couple of years, but I think there was 4 of us that it did. No, actually, I should say 3 of us freshmen that did follow through all the way to our senior year. But yeah, we talk about the other special team bonding, maybe that we shouldn't be talking about. That was part of it. But yeah, those are your best friends going through college. You're sharing all the highs and lows.
the vulnerability and trust that those relationships require. I think that's why when you ask, former collegiate athletes, they're still locked in with those teammates because of the forced vulnerability that was required through all that adversity. So yeah, I do still stay in touch with some of them. We've got a text thread, every once in a while. Everybody's got their own little families now, which is kind of fun. But yeah, I even got a little photo album up here in my office as kind of a reminder too, for my current athletes, that this is really what it's all about. It's about being part of something that's bigger than each one of you.
Where Are They Now? Presented by Ryan and Miller Law. Scotta Morton, our guest, a Bozeman native, a Gallatin Gateway native, rather, for those that are actually from Montana. It's certainly a distinctly different thing, as well as a Montana State alum and now a elite mental health coach. I think she could actually help anybody, not just in the sports realm, but across the board. We shall continue this on our Where Are They Now series right after this. Where Are They Now series features Scotta Morton, a Gallatin Gateway native and a Montana State alum. More on her in just a minute, but let's hear from her. She is a mental health counselor. She started her career with at the University of Missouri, and now she has her own practice. So here's some thoughts on mental health, sports, from perhaps the best expert I've ever talked to on this subject.
It's so true, because we talk about these games that we win together, but really it's the car rides, the plane trips, the hotels, all these other pieces that play such a pivotal role in forming those relationships. Can you speak to that, Scotta, on why you decided to launch Go For It coaching and step outside of the university system and really launch your own business? Did your teammates and friends have some influence in you deciding, hey, I'm ready to go for it?
Yeah, that's a great question. To be quite honest, my career at University of Missouri kind of mirrored my collegiate experience, in that I had 4 ADs also during my time. So interesting enough how that kind of helped prepare me and plan me for what I was going to see in my career. So all ADs are going to have incredibly different philosophies, expectations. You kind of got to start over, right? And I was kind of in the background helping to form relationship with the coaches and build camaraderie amongst them, and also with the administration. So I had some really unique experiences throughout my time there. But I will say that I knew college athletics wasn't going to be it forever. Loved it for the younger version of me. And not to say that I'm really old, like being gone weekends, traveling, late hours. I was ready, realizing that I was longing for something, probably a deeper connection with my work. And one, to get to athletes sooner. So because of their recruitable age, if I got asked by a high school student athlete to meet, I had to turn them down because they were of recruitable age. So that was part of the desire to break out, is to meet with athletes sooner, but also to expand my clientele, right? I love sport. We could talk about a great platform, but I was also kind of sick of sport. Like, I wanted to talk about other performance fields. I do some corporate coaching now. I work with Deloitte and some of their PPMDs. And then just anybody who's, really looking for a better relationship with themselves, but also more freedom and peace, and that's interested in personal development. Love the 18 to 22, but I was also ready to meet with some people outside of that age range.
What just compare and contrast your former job with your new job then? I mean, what do you like about
Yeah, great question. Well, one, I'm kind of alone as I'm here in my office and my own voice echoing off these walls. At Mizzou, I had a great team. So I worked with 2 other counseling psychologists and 3 other mental performance coaches. So it was so easy to make referrals. They were literally right down the hall, something that was out of my scope of competence. I actually do, in this office building, have some other licensed counselors that have kind of served that need as well. But a lot more autonomy, Coulter, a lot more time to go home to visit family and friends in Montana on my timeline. Zoom, the idea of this computer, I can take work with me. And I've just had some opportunities, to kind of reach out of the Missouri bubble. Now working with some other, collegiate teams around the nation. Sometimes I'll go visit them. Sometimes it's over Zoom. But day to day, it just looks a little bit different. And also, if I want to leave at 2, I can, or come back at 6 to do some work, I can. So the flexibility has been amazing, even when I'm still trying to learn the size of the business here too, which has been a sharp learning curve.
What was it like being in the SEC? Because obviously you played the Big Sky Cougars, but the SEC has been so huge, and Missouri has such a distinctly unique place in the SEC as well.
That's right. Yeah. Well, coming back from like the bubble that I lived in Montana, I was like, Montana State was it. I mean, that's as big as it gets, right? You're like, I'm coming in out of Bobcat. And then you get here, you're like, what? Just the, and Mizzou probably has one of the lowest budgets considering all the SEC schools. So just the traveling, when I go teams to see their facilities and all their resources that they have, it was just mind blowing. But in a sense, to that point of also a reason why I decided to leave is that sport at that level, I think at any level, it becomes very, very intoxicating. It's easy to lose oneself. It's easy to lose perspective. Obviously, money is really driving that now with NIL and some other things that are, that make the system a little bit more challenging to work for, especially as a student support professional. But yeah, I mean, still amazing. You're seeing the best of the best. Right. And so I've got to see some amazing athletes compete over my time there.
The topic of mental health has really propelled into the forefront, Scotta. I'm not sure if it is our youth is any different than when we played then versus now. But it's certainly the discussion of pressures with these student athletes. And I'd really like to hear about Go For It coaching and talking about the mindset and the motivation approach. When you look at this complete picture, can you elaborate on this?
Yeah. I know I've shared this, Krista, but it's a story that I like to tell because, when I do give a presentation, sometimes it's out of sport. And, I'll get to a particular slide where I'm talking about what it means to be the man or woman in the arena, right? So that's a Teddy Roosevelt quote about daring greatly, right? And sure enough, I'll get asked, Dr. Morton, don't you think kids these days, don't you think kids these days are just soft and weak and entitled? And then proceed to share what they had to do back in their day. And I think all of us at some point have had maybe some of those, entertained some of those ideas, like if we're being honest. So my argument back to that, or asking them to consider, is that even when I played at Montana State, we talked about I had some horrible shooting nights. Horrible, like 1 for 13. I can remember this specific game. It was terrible. However, I did not have to read about those until the newspaper the next day. And my dad would hurry up and get in his truck and go down and grab the newspaper and see what they were saying about Scotta Morton on the Bozeman Daily Chronicle before I could see them. Right. And then so my counter back is always, when do athletes get feedback now? It's immediate. It's while they're competing, while they're playing. There's just access to some good, but most of the time it's the cheap seat feedback for people that have not dared greatly with their lives. So I do think that it takes more mental toughness or courage or whatever you want to call it to be the person in the arena, because there's greater temptation to want to play it safe. There's going to be a greater temptation to play it small, to protect oneself, right? We call that, Michael Gervais calls that FOPO, because the fear of other people's opinions, and how that becomes the biggest thief, to our well-being and performance. So yeah, the mental health performance conversation has been there, but it's elevated now because the platform and stage is bigger and there are more people watching.
More resources is obviously a good thing for people that are struggling or have obstacles or are still trying to grow. But on the other hand, there's sort of the notion that the more you know, the more you think, and the more it hurts you, especially in the performance arena. So how do you balance either side of that equation? Yeah,
my introduction with every athlete is just to talk about the idea of thoughts and what thoughts are. And I know I shared this, but early on we were so into these cognitive control strategies. So if you're having a bad thought, just replace it with this positive thought. Control what you think, Coulter, right? If you're having negative thoughts, just let them go, right? Replace them. Like, I've got this, you're good. And that never really resonated with me as an athlete. Then I would experience so much judgment. Oh crap, I'm not supposed to be thinking these things. And that become a distraction in itself. So how is it working for everybody controlling what they think? Has anybody mastered that? Usually people grin and let they do that, right? No. So it's really not about controlling the narrative. It's changing their relationship to it. The idea that we don't have to buy in or entertain everything that we think. Thoughts are just thoughts, right? So the mindfulness is the, accepting, the noticing what's there so that I can let it go, to come back to my committed actions, to coming back to the present moment. That's huge in the work that I do, increasing more moments of presence in our life, whether that's on the court or off the court. And, nobody's mastered that completely because our mind likes to wander. Like even in this right now, we're having thoughts that are trying to take us out of the moment. Right.
Mesmerized by our conversation here. And little did you know, Coulter and I are getting a session from you because we are really phenomenal.
Yeah.
I look at my journey in finding a yoga practice after I finished professional basketball and what that did for my body awareness.
Yes.
And I feel like that piece is so critical as athletes go through injuries and they are continually told to almost disengage from their body, ignore what your body is telling you because it's for the love of the game. And I'm finding that some of that context has really shifted in our dialogue.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's what I love about the yoga. It teaches us to be more embodied, right? And to be in a loving relationship with our bodies. Even the idea of teaching ourselves how to breathe, when we'd have a coach who might see that we're upset or anxious and stressed, just take a deep breath, right? Just take a deep breath. And so it's like, okay, that's this deep calming breath. It's like even, through yoga of learning actually how to breathe in a way so it can be the anchor during those times of stress, like even learning to belly breathe so it's not even coming through the chest, and be able to pause and come back. And that's what we'll talk with athletes when they feel like, oh, this feels like kind of soft work. It's when you describe moments of, like if I were to ask you, Krista, a time where you were in flow or close to it and you were in the zone and it was like you couldn't miss anything that you threw up was just, and it's almost like time slowed down. You weren't aware of your self-conscious, you weren't thinking, how am I doing? What are people thinking? And then people after the game, they ask, well, what were you thinking out there? What was going on? And you say, I wasn't.
I was just being. Right.
Yeah.
I don't have too many of those memories.
Me either.
I've been on some really good teams, but it's almost like a complete peacefulness though. It's not a lack of awareness. It's actually a focus. It is, I think, even being more connected.
That's right.
And I love the way that you're articulating this because it's very true. And I don't want to say that athletes try to achieve that, but I think that sometimes we put so much focus on getting to a destination with athletes, start to finish. Where are you going to be? Are you all conference? Did you get MVP? And really, there's so much more that goes into this game.
That's right, Krista. And what you're speaking of, all those are antagonists to actually being flow in the moment. Because when you're flow in the moment, it's such an autotelic experience where you're doing it for the sake of playing. That's how we describe those moments. And then the focus on the outcome or those expectations that are exactly those thoughts that take us out of the moment, right? Rather than coming back to now. So I'm with you. It's not like I want every athlete to have expectation they should be experiencing flow, but in flow, what's happening is that we were so present. So we can dial up more moments, but also be ready to understand that most of sport is about embracing the suck. Most of sport, you are not in flow. Right. So be able to compete with what you got. But at the same time, we can still train the mind to be more present.
Have you read the book Flow?
Yes. Don't ask me to repeat his name. I always mess it up.
I know. I can never say it either.
He used to do a nickname of Mahaley, and I know it's longer than that.
Yeah. It's just fascinating, though, because I read that whole book without realizing that it was written in like 1991.
Sure.
And it's totally applicable now, right? I read it like 2 years ago, and not much has changed, but that was probably very innovative then because I thought it was even innovative now, some 30 years later. From like a pure medical standpoint, like he just mentioned it, being in the present moment is sort of how you attain the flow state. Like what's happening, this might be too complicated of a question, but like what's happening in your brain when you find that flow state?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you kind of what's, from my scientific, what's not happening is that we're not in the fight or flight response.
Totally.
Right. And that's what usually when we get in and we get triggered is what becomes a thief to that intention. So it's when the brain sends an alarm system. Sometimes it actually does feel like life or death, on the court. And that's why that fight or flight's going, oh, protect here. Right. And so what we're learning to do through mindfulness meditation is actually turn back on the prefrontal cortex and dial down the fight or flight response, and that's what the mindfulness part is really doing, so that it's not in the driver's seat.
So many great athletes. One of my favorite parts about covering sports is studying the psychology of what makes people great. You mentioned your agricultural background. That's one common theme we found in this Where Are They Now series, especially for people from Montana, is just sort of that common thing that they share. So much with male athletes, especially that have become so great, the other common thing they share is somewhere in their lives where they got slighted, where they felt not good enough. And it's the famous story of Michael Jordan getting cut from his junior high or his JV varsity basketball team or whatever.
Yeah.
Kobe Bryant used to always talk about that too, right? That seems like there's an element of that can motivate you to the highest degree, but also is like a negative thing to help the part of your centered psychology. So just take us through the balance of that. Is that using negative happenings into a positive fashion? What do you think of that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So when I talk with athletes, you're exactly right, because there's part of that makes you really good. Like the fear of failure or the something to prove makes you what? Put in all the work, have some discipline and consistency. That's right. But also what I notice is as athletes get older, even though there's part of that that's made them really good, some of that's no longer serving them because it's actually taken away the joy and love for the competition. They still bring that mindset in competition, right? Where they're identifying with that role of having something to prove. And so when they don't get the outcome or result that they want, then they're feeling pretty defeated. Then there's a lot of suffering there, right? Because they put all their eggs in this one basket of thinking that the only way that they're going to feel enough is by the things outside of them. So what is that? Is it the goal that you have to meet? Is it proving so-and-so wrong? Like all these things are outside of control for you. So it's helping them understand, there's part of it that's good. And now how can I learn to be able to loosen the grip a little bit on that so it can bring some more joy and well-being back in your performance? I've got that piece to me too, that protector part, right? That still comes even probably from, those wounds that I experienced throughout my career that make me want to dig down and grit and work really, really hard and be better than the other guy. And I also know that sucks out the joy in my work. Even though it led to a lot of me helping me develop my competence, it's not the relationship I want to have with myself where I experience more flow and love in what I'm doing. Yeah. So at one point, those things serve us, and then sometimes they don't anymore, right? And it's kind of that double-edged sword a little bit. Yeah, we're still working on, how to relate better to those thoughts.
Where are they now? Ryan and Miller Law. Scotta Morton, a Gallatin Gateway native, as well as a Montana State alum. Ryan Miller Law approaches every case like it's going to trial from day one. They have a 24/7 phone line. You can dial 542-2233. That's 542-2233. Available 24/7. Or with myself, Colter Nuanez, and Krista Redpath right after this. It's our Where Are They Now series with Scotta Morton. She is a Gallatin Gateway native and a Montana State basketball alum. Our Where Are They Now featuring Scotta Morton. Spent more than a decade at the University of Missouri, heading up the mental health and sports psychology department there, and has gone out on her own since then. It's presented by Ryan and Miller Law.
Angie, in today's world of ever-changing economy, finances are never far from anyone's mind. It's the way it is, and it's especially that way for professional services. How much does it cost to talk to you?
So actually to talk to us and get a consultation, no matter what your case is, it's absolutely free. That's really the beauty of our job, that we can help people, give them some guidance, and it's free. It doesn't cost anything. For personal injury, medical malpractice, it's actually, you never pay anything to us. If we get a settlement or a judgment or a verdict for you, then we get a portion of that, but otherwise you're not paying us any money. So it's really helpful to prospective clients.
More with Scotta Morton right now.
This past year, we saw a real change in women's basketball in terms of Caitlin Clark movement throughout the U.S. I want to say that Cameron Brink contributed to that, Angel Reese, but there was really a buzz around Caitlin Clark. And if you followed that this year, can you give me your opinion as a former player of what you see with just how the game is evolving?
Yeah, wow, Caitlin, that's on everybody's news feeds, right, too. My personal, I think she's an incredible player, what a platform she's created for sport and more viewership, too. And, at the same time, I have empathy and I'm sensitive to all the WNBA players that came before her, that haven't quite got that viewership too. Sophie Cunningham, was someone that we worked with at University of Missouri. So I got to follow her career a little bit and be a little bit more inside with her days at Phoenix Mercury and hear a little bit more about her side of things coming in as a rookie. So I was kind of prepared for what that rookie treatment looked like a little bit. But yeah, I mean, in all honesty, I'm watching the WNBA even more, and I'm a former player. It's like, yeah, I'm looking to see when Caitlin is playing as well. It's been great for the game.
The argument can be that women's basketball has always been a beautiful product. I think just playing below the rim, it's fundamental. It's fun to watch when it's executed properly, or I feel like when teams are really clicking, and this Iowa team was really fun. But what I do like about Caitlin Clark, and when you ask her about it, she states there's room for all of us. So let's just continue to propel this game forward.
Yeah, for sure. I think, being in Caitlin's, I can't imagine being in Caitlin's shoes. I think about that all the time. It's just how overwhelming, even as a phenomenal player, that would be, and under the scrutiny and the magnifying glass. So we feel it, maybe even, in our little spotlights that we have, let alone that magnifying times a lot. So, I'm always careful in any type of the desire to critique or see some things like, that's not really whatever part of the game going, wow, what she's doing at her age and at that game is very impressive. Speaking about being the woman in the arena.
Coulter?
I'm just trying to think of this. Is there, this may be a complex question too, but is there a way to ignore all of that? Like the attention that Caitlin Clark gets? Like I think about this on the show all the time. Like I have a fundamental block in my mind where I refuse to believe that anybody listens or watches the show ever. I literally treat it that I am talking to whoever's in studio with me or I'm talking to my producer, and that is all. It doesn't matter if there's 1 or 25,000 people listening. Can you do that in sports?
I think you can get really good at setting up boundaries for yourself to mitigate it a little bit. I can imagine that Caitlin, I actually read too, where she did see a sports psychologist at Iowa. I'm sure she has a great supportive team around her. I'm sure she's got some things on her phone, so some feeds that are not coming to her. The temptation is probably going to be there sometimes. But I certainly still think she's going to feel it, especially when she walks into that gym, right, with all the buzz. I think probably her time away, she's probably having to be really boundaried so that she can have that self-care and maybe making sure she's nurturing that soul and is around, that inner circle of people that see her as Caitlin and not just Caitlin, the basketball player. But I can imagine it's very difficult. I said, even with my high-profile athletes I work with at Mizzou, it's like I would say, what would you think about turning your notifications off? Because deleting the social media was out of it. There's no way that's going to happen, right? But what if you thought about turning your notifications off for this game? But it's hard. You have a great game where you're the hero, quarterback, last year's team. And so you also want to see the other stuff that comes from it, right? You want to also see the hero in the story, especially if you've been working your butt off that whole time to earn that type of platform and to earn your spot. So yeah, I don't know if you completely can. I think you can set up, again, measures to help create those boundaries to feel what you need to feel safe and supported. But there's so much uncertainty and things that happen where I think it makes it quite impossible to completely block it out.
When it comes to the future of this whole thing, both for your involvement in all of it, as well as just the long-term future of just mental health advocacy and the evolution of all of the things that we understand, what's the end point, or is there an end point? And if there isn't an end point, how do you sort of keep going and keep pursuing? Because there is no perfect centering at the end of all of this.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, that's why I see this work. Coulter is like, I know the buzzword of performing is what gets me in the door, having these conversations, but I'm sick of hearing about performing. I just think this work is really about humaning, and like we all have this one precious life, and if we can bring more peace and freedom and joy into it, that's the work that I'm about. And like I said, even through the evolution of my career, I've probably been obsessed with sport and thinking more about routines and how we build confidence and those things that are really important, like typical mental skills. And now, where my path is going is towards a silent meditation retreat that I'm taking here in September in Colorado, to just because I'm noticing some teachings that are resonating with me and where in my intersection in life, and how can I help, build my tool skill so I can actually meet the person where they are in front of me. So there's no destination. For me, I don't know who I am at my best or if I ever will. I want to keep learning and growing. That's a part of the work that I love. I want to stay true to being authentic. I don't want to serve athletes or specific teams because it makes me look good. That would have been me earlier in my career. Again, with this idea of still feeling the need to be liked. And work something like, hey, I work with so-and-so, it's fell into that trap early on. So as cliche as it sounds, was learning to come back to more of this loving kind awareness and coming home to oneself and, really be able to be present in more of the width of a moment, and a lot of that's with loving, right? It's pretty shallow if we just want to be the best for ourselves. The whole goal is to be best for other people, to better our relationship with other people. And that's the work that I'm about.
She's hired. I think everybody should hire Scotta Morton. What a great guest on Where Are They Now series. We're up against it. Krista Redpath in studio. Just one final thought on Scotta. I mean, that was exceptional. Thank you so much for setting that up.
Tremendous. And a leader. And I just think a Montana treasure, honestly. And this series is allowing us to bring these stories to our listeners and viewers. And I think we had such a moment with her, Coulter. But I hope that everyone out there that listened today will learn more about her and the battle of mental illness and the uphill battle that some athletes face with the battle with themselves, honestly. And so you should go find her on Go For It Coaching on Twitter, on Instagram, and follow her and get to know her, because I know she is working with organizations that aren't necessarily in sports. And so if you have a need, you should reach out.
What she just said, being the best for yourself is important, but also can be selfish. Being the best for others, cultivating love and energy, that's what it's all about. Appreciate Scotta Morton for taking some time